Hello, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to create a change culture. Let me first invite our speakers to the podium, please, with your warm applause, of course. Yeah. So let me introduce myself a little bit, and then I will introduce speakers. My name is Özgür Bolat. I come from University of Cambridge. Also, I'm a faculty member at Bahçeşehir University in Istanbul. I know someone who loves Istanbul here. And also, I am a columnist for a newspaper in Turkey. And let me introduce our speakers, panelist, Professor Philip from MIT. He's a professor of history at MIT. He was the dean of Humanities and Art and Social Science. He's also chairman of Board of Trustees at American University of Beirut. So he has been dealing with creating a change culture at MIT for a long time. And then Mr. Omi, he was former Minister of Finance in Japan. Also, he's the founder of SDS, Science and Technology in Society. So, and then we have Bowman Hayden. He's with Qatar Foundation, and he's the director of, I always forget, Design Zone Initiative. They are all here because they are, in some way or other, dealing with change. Professor Philip is creating an innovative culture at MIT, so he's going to share his experience with us. And Mr. Omi is trying to change a culture from imitating to innovation and creation in education, in the society at a more macro level. And Bo is trying to create a culture change from industrial way of thinking to knowledge-based economy. First, I'm going to set the scene talking about leadership and change a little bit. And then we will let our speakers do 5 to 10 minute presentation. Then we will have a debate, and then we will have question and answers. I consulted 2 companies, and there was an emailing problem. So the CEO was saying there's too much emailing and there is too much CCing. It was a big problem. And I said it's not a problem, it's a solution to something. We have to find what it is. Two companies, 2 emailing problems. In one of the companies, people are using emailing and CCing as a way of archiving messages because they are not accountable, so they can tell each other, hey, I told you. They say, no, you didn't tell me. They say, look at the email. So they are a cultural problem there, a problem of blame culture and accountability. In another culture, in another company, they are CCing the authority figures because unless authority figures know what's going on, they don't trust each other's words. So they are CCing the authority figure so that things get done. So as a leader, you cannot solve this as a technical solution. You have to look at the culture, why there is a blame or accountability culture. And also, I am looking at school settings, and teachers are saying students are very silent. When I ask them questions, they don't answer. They don't know how to think. So they interpreted silence as lack of ideas. But there's a bigger problem, cultural problems, because when the teacher says or implies there's only one truth in the curriculum, students don't need to speak up. So if you want to solve this problem, you have to solve the teaching culture, because teachers get their power from knowing rather than learning. So when we do professional development activities with teachers, if you don't look at this cultural aspect, then we cannot change anything. So culture is very important, and leadership very important. And people are trying to solve this with top-down initiatives. And this is what we don't want. We want distributed leadership where everyone takes responsibility for making change possible or changing culture. Otherwise, technical solutions will not solve our problems. So now, rather than talking about change as a concept, we thought it's much better to listen our panelists' experience in creating change. Now we can start with Professor Philip, and you can talk about your experience creating a change culture at MIT.
Thank you, Özgür. I appreciate that. I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm hoping in our discussion and in the audience we can get to creating a change culture. What I want to do is just make several points about this panel and try to give you my sense of where the high end of the education pyramid is and where it isn't today. My points derive mainly from my experience at MIT, though I am involved in other institutions of higher learning that have strong research orientations, research universities. But it's been 20 years of that kind of experience that leads me to say what I'm going to say, for better or worse. Now, some have argued that the conservative nature of university is what has allowed universities to stay around as long as they have, by comparison to corporations and other business enterprises, which have had comparatively short lives. There's a statistic I got there from a colleague of mine recently that says that 75% of the oldest institutions in the Western world are universities. The other 25 are made up of the church, only a handful of governments with constitutions that have lasted more or less that long, and almost no commercial enterprises. My second point runs against my first, in that I no longer think universities can afford to remain so conservative, even though conservatism in some sense has helped these institutions. It's no longer sufficient to say that changing a university culture is a glacial process, a very slow and rarely deliberate process. I'd argue that today the American research university is confronted with having to undertake accelerated change to survive, and it has to embrace change in a much more deliberate, structured manner than it has in the past if it hopes to retain its robustness, strength, and international leadership. And related to this point is the observable fact that more and more of the change taking place in the university today is what we call directed change, that is, top-down change, for better or worse. I'd argue that the old glory days when the faculty were responsible for much of the decision-making that goes on in a university, those days are rapidly disappearing. Faculty control is becoming a relic of the past. Senior university administrations have managed to gather more and more of the levers. You see, when I mention senior administration, this is what happens. It's always an attack on us. Have managed to gather more and more of the levers of control and authority into their own hands over time. I've observed in my own university that each time there's been a major financial crisis in the United States, some of them global, of course, in the early 90s, and then when the dot-com bubble burst just around the turn of this century, and most recently with the financial meltdown of 2008 and 2009, our senior administration has managed to increase its control over the system of decision-making and resource allocation. They are able to do this by gaining more and more control of the resources coming from individuals, foundations, corporations, in the way of donations to the university, and this gives the administration increased leverage, of course, over the running of the university. The faculty still, thank goodness, have considerable sway over the curriculum and the research focus that departments, labs, and centers wish to pursue. So not everything is driven downward into the institution by the central administration, but at the same time I'm observing a growing trend that finds the senior administration increasingly taking control of the process by which the university sets its research agenda. In an era of scarce resources, the senior leadership is increasingly organizing major research and capacity building initiatives from above by convincing the faculty and students that they will have not only easier access to financial resources if they agree to participate in these top-down, large-scale initiatives, but also the faculty will be giving the administrative support needed to manage their research enterprises in return for participation. You can see this especially clearly when it comes to the international projects that American universities are increasingly engaged in abroad. Now, I think many of us would agree that for decades now, the world has been coming to study and even work in the American Research University. But in recent years, another trend has emerged, almost with a vengeance, and that is the movement of the American university abroad. The American university, simply put, is engaging more and more in the international arena, opening campuses abroad, collaborating with foreign governments to help build new universities for them, modeled on the American Research University, whether in engineering or medicine or business, and sending more of its students abroad to study and to do internships. As with all else, the movement of the American university abroad is increasingly a top-down activity. We're witnessing more and more partnerships forged between foreign governments and the senior administration of various American research universities that send American research and educational know-how and American faculty and students abroad in return for significant sums of funding from foreign governments back to our research universities. We're discovering that many of these large-scale research challenges, whether in health or medicine or energy and the environment or poverty alleviation and megacities, cannot be examined scientifically by staying in the United States. The challenge we face, the experiments we need to run, the solutions we're seeking are much more likely to be found abroad by engaging with new international partners. The challenges we're facing in the American Research University are: how do we continue to be a talent magnet in a world that is becoming increasingly competitive and which is not simply developing universities that one day will, if they're not already, competing with the high end of American research universities and others, but are also now creating the economies of growth that are making it far more attractive for those who do come to study in our universities to actually go home and be employed gainfully and in interesting positions. How long that will last, I don't know, but there is definitely a trend back home. So to make matters worse, that we're creating our own competition, if you like, in America, and it's not clear how we're going to survive this. A second challenge is how to adjust to the painful reality that our government is no longer able to fund the research university, and the government has historically been the major funder of the American Research University, starting in the Second World War, as many of you know. Those days look numbered. It's less and less opportunity to find things. So we are going out and doing various kinds of projects. Education City here in Qatar is a fine example in Doha of what we're talking about. We're building campuses, and if we're not building campuses, we're helping to build our own campuses, we're helping to build other people's campuses. And that, in its sense, may be a way of transferring the crown jewels of American higher education and research to other lands. And we're being accused of giving it away, maybe even too cheaply. A third challenge, and then I will stop, facing our research universities is online learning. Many of you are experts in this area. My university doesn't do a lot of online learning, but it did develop OCW, Open Courseware, so our entire curriculum is out there for the entire world that can tap into the internet. And even if you can't, we'll send you discs that will allow you to see our curriculum and at least engage with it. Now, I say all of this because what is the biggest debate going on these days? It's not simply about do we do online education and how well can we do it and what does it mean going global with online education, but what will be the future of the residential campus in the United States and elsewhere for that matter. If students can get a pretty darn good education by sitting in their dormitory rooms, watching lectures online and occasionally showing up for a lab or whatever, you begin to ask yourself in time, are we going to have to give up residential learning? Residential learning, which is a very expensive operation for our universities, where tuition and room and board is now approaching $60,000. So I leave you with those three challenges that we're facing, among many, many others. All that to say, there's so much interest in what is going on in primary and secondary education and how do we make them better. I just wanted to say, we need to do a lot more on the research university front to make them more robust than they currently are, at least the ones I know in the United States and those who have attempted to mimic, copy, and even create of that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Professor Todd. And Rami? Yes, please.
I'm Koji Omi, founder and chairman of Science and Technology in Society Forum. Thank you for inviting me to this session at the WISE Forum. I founded the Science and Technology in Society Forum in 2004. The fundamental concept of the STS Forum is as follows. The progress of science and technology has brought economic growth and enriched our quality of life. On the other hand, science and technology has brought about new ethical, security, and environmental problems such as climate change, human cloning, and privacy in information and communication technology. We call these the lights and shadows of science and technology. We must strengthen the lights and control the shadows of science and technology. This is why I started the STS Forum, where not only professional scientists and academics, but also policymakers, business executives, media leaders, and governmental officials meet to exchange views on how to deal with science and technology issues as their own problem, rather than leaving solutions only to scientists and engineers. The 8th annual meeting of STS Forum, held October 2nd to 4th in Kyoto, Japan, was highly successful. Approximately 800 participants from 80 countries, regions, and international organizations, including 9 Nobel laureates, 17 science and technology ministers, and 40 university presidents, meet to exchange ideas for how to deal with the problems of science and technology from the long-term perspective of humankind. This year, we discussed energy and the environment, global health, food and population, sustainability, and many other topics. Also included in our program was science and technology education for the 21st century. When we think about the future of science and technology education, developing creative and innovative ways of thinking is most important. Now, I would like to give an overview of education in Japan, especially as it pertains to science and technology. As is common throughout Asia, Japan traditionally placed importance on education. After World War II, Japanese society changed drastically. The education system also changed after the war. Less control by the government and more autonomy and freedom became important concepts in education to promote individuality. Under this new system of science and education, a system of society and education, Japan introduced and digested scientific knowledge from abroad. We imported technology in various fields, from textiles, petrochemicals, to electronics and automobiles. Basic knowledge and technology introduced from other countries were studied and improved to perfect process innovation and also to create new products. This gave us the ability to mass produce at low cost and become competitive in world markets. Until the 1980s, Japan worked very hard to catch up with other industrial countries. Exports of industrial products enabled us to earn foreign currency and put us among the ranks of the developed countries. Japan became one of the frontrunners in science, technology, and industry. During this period of economic growth, Japanese education focused mainly on teaching and assimilating superior knowledge and technology from abroad. But for the next step of development, Japan could no longer depend on learning from other countries. The time had come for us to arrive at fundamental scientific concepts on our own and explore the truth of natural principles through basic research. This change began to occur in the middle of the 1990s. We knew that without fundamental scientific concepts and without knowing the truth of natural principles, we could not create any technology seeds and push industry forward to a new phase. At that time, I played a central role in the Japanese Diet in proposing the Science and Technology Basic Law, which was passed by the Diet in November 1995. Under this law, the government issues a Science and Technology Basic Plan every 5 years. The fourth Science and Technology Basic Plan, decided August this year, is for fiscal years from 2011 to 2015. These successive Science and Technology Basic Plans emphasize the importance of creative and innovative thinking, because original scientific and technology seeds will be the driving force for Japanese development in the future. Japanese scientists are searching for new scientific breakthroughs and technology seeds through basic research. But technology seeds do not automatically translate into economic results. To bridge the gap between the laboratory and the market, closer relations are needed between universities and private companies. Cooperation among universities, private companies, and public research institutions is now vital for creative and innovative science and technology activities. Cooperation among these three sectors helps incubate new technology from the scientific seeds discovered through basic research and connect to creating new businesses in the private sector. These cooperative activities not only promote growth in our society and the economy, but also contribute to global economic development. The change from adopting and improving knowledge produced elsewhere to developing fundamental concepts on our own necessitated changes to our education system. After the Science and Technology Basic Law was passed, education in Japan has shifted from memorizing knowledge and imitating to exploring truth in principles. In other words, education must be creative and innovative. This change is still ongoing, and I believe there is much more to do to improve Japanese education in this direction. In the past few years, Japanese government has taken some measures to promote the change from imitating to creating and innovating in education. One example is financial support for high schools promoting a creative and innovative science program, inviting top-level researchers from universities to teach and help with experiments at those schools, and sending high school students to university and corporate research labs for hands-on experience. Exposure to different cultures and different ways of thinking is also very important for nurturing creative and innovative ideas. One of the most effective ways to nurture this mindset among young researchers is leaving their home country and going abroad for advanced study and research. The government supports this through a program for strategic dispatching abroad for young people. I believe that changing the education culture from imitating to creating and innovating will be very important for many countries that want to develop their economy and society by promoting science and technology. So I hope that today's discussion will help us focus on how to develop and support creative and innovative thinking effectively. Since 2004, when the first STS Forum took place, we have had annual meetings that brings together global leaders not only in science and technology, but also in policymaking, business, and media to discuss the implications of science and technology for society. Our program includes sessions on education, where we discussed the importance of science and technology education, of collaboration among academia, industries, and government, and of research to stimulate innovation. We acknowledge the need to establish a science-literate society, nurture creative and critical thinking skills, and encourage tripartite cooperation for achieving breakthrough technologies. The STS Forum shares common concerns with WISE, and we hope to collaborate with you to promote innovation thinking through education. I hope that participants at WISE will attend the next STS Forum in Kyoto, October 2012, to discuss important issues, including how to change the education culture to develop creative and innovative thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. We mostly talk about content of change. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about methodology, if you want to, or add something. Yeah, yeah.
You're trying to make it difficult on me. It's like you're going to hand me an envelope, and I'm going to open it up, and this is what you're going to talk about at that moment. My name is Bo Hayden, and now my phone is ringing. Sorry, apologize. It's my wife, too. That'll be a problem for turning that off on her as well.
Shall I do the talk for you?
I'll just make sure it doesn't happen again. Sorry, I apologize. So I get in trouble twice, once for my phone on and once for turning my wife off, right? What was that? Bo Hayden, yes. My name is Bo Hayden, and I'm the director of a new center here at Qatar Foundation focused on design innovation. Before that, I was the innovation director at QSTP, which is the big building behind this building. It's very close, but I have to drive all the way around, so it's hoping one day we'll have the bridge across and make it a little bit easier. It was funny when we talk about change, you know, the first thing is creating a change culture, and I know it's a broad term, so we could talk about a lot of things. And certainly the areas that have already been discussed are areas that I worked a lot in with what is the new role of the university, what does an entrepreneurial university mean, what is the mission of its role in society, its third mission sometimes, and what this means in relation to research. Because there's a difference between applied research and research, applied. And these are different things that are done by different people, and what should be the role of university and how should that change in a society, especially when we talk about a society that's a knowledge economy. Certainly the role of education is fundamental, and the role of universities is fundamental when we talk about a knowledge economy, because knowledge and education go hand in hand, of course. What's interesting is I've been working on my budget recently. This is the budget week, which makes it a bit crazy. And when we're filling out the forms on what we're doing, there's a category that says, is this business as usual, or an enhancement, or a new initiative? And I'm thinking, we're an institute for innovation. Are we ever going to pick business as usual? Just cross that one out. We're never going to pick that one, right? And I think that this is the kind of way of thinking that even though I'm sure some things within the system of how the budget works probably should be put as business as usual, it just doesn't seem right in a center of innovation. Won't we always be enhancing? Isn't this something we're always going to do? And for me, being a kind of entrepreneurial person by heart, I just see this as just normal. But I've worked in a number of multinational companies and worked in universities, and I played basketball for a while. I'm also the tallest person at Qatar Foundation, by the way. I saw someone else that was kind of tall, but I got close to him and I realized I was still a little taller, so it felt better. But through all this is that you realize that change is not necessarily that exciting for everybody. You know, in many companies, if you go in and say, look, we're going to do some change, there's going to be some changes around here, this is not necessarily something that makes everyone all excited, right? So the first question is, of course, is change desirable? And as you said, Philip, is that maybe change, or the lack of change, or tradition in some of it is what make people last long. But of course, what is their impact? So some things can be around for a long time, but how do they make an impact? And so I think, though, there's no choice. You have to change. And maybe the word innovation is better than change, right? Innovation sounds better. It sounds like you're not just changing, you're trying to create something better. So maybe I think the word innovation is a good word. It's maybe overused, but I think it's better than change. And as we think about a knowledge economy, we have a few issues between the developed world and the developing world. In the developed world, where we've had an industrial economy for a long time, we're very captured, right? Everything is about digging something out of the ground, bending it into shape, distributing it, selling it, fixing it when it's broken. So that as soon as we think about business or doing any type of wealth and welfare creation, the wealth is created by the industrialists who pay off a little bit of money that then goes to helping people that need it. That's how the system works. And we get so captured in that system that we don't understand how to do anything else other than that. Everybody in a developed country was born into that type of system. But when we talk about a knowledge economy, we talk about a paradigm shift. Now all of a sudden it's not the control of the factors of production that are important, it's now the control of knowledge. And what does that mean? And what should be the role of the university? Should it generate knowledge? Should it control knowledge? And how is the control of knowledge important to the dissemination of knowledge? Is it positive or is it negative? And so positions in companies, nowadays you have companies that have no physical assets. You know, Bill Gates was kind of the poster child of the person, the richest man in the world. He only owns intellectual property, nothing physical, just ones and zeros. So you can create a lot of wealth in society by controlling intellectual things, by controlling knowledge, and that changes the power structures of society. But in the developing world, which is almost by definition considered non-industrial, we have the problem there where we haven't built up the industrial frameworks that allow us maybe to more easily move into a knowledge economy. So in the developed countries, we're kind of captured in an industrial way of thinking. And in the developing countries, we haven't been able to build this type of wealth and welfare. So what will it mean to become an industrial country in an era where industrialization is giving way to knowledge-based business? In Qatar, for instance, being here for 3 years has been an extremely interesting experience. And my colleagues here in the front row, we work together building this Design Innovation Institute. Qatar has this very strong national vision. It's very much about transforming the country from a carbon-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. And the thing that's so amazing to me and what made me want to come to Qatar and work is that no one, who comes up with this kind of great vision when everything is going great, right? This is a vision for change when everything is very good. That doesn't happen very often. Most companies or countries, they have to have two wheels of the bus hanging off the cliff, and then they decide, well, maybe change could be good right now. You see that in the United States where I grew up nowadays. Things have to get kind of in a disaster area before change. So Qatar's like, no, things are going good, but we still need to do something different to be better in the future. And that doesn't happen. And I played lots of sports with teams, and people don't like to change things that are going well. So it takes a lot of leadership. And so I think if I'll finish just on the concept of leadership. For me, having played on a lot of basketball teams over the years professionally, the government, universities, multinational companies, I think there's a few things that are important. So for those of you out there that are leading change, and I'm sure you have a similar list of things, I think that a few things are important. One is that you have to bear witness. You have to be the person that shows the change. You can't be waiting for someone else. You have to try it. So you have to take a little bit, you have to lead by example, right? You have to be genuine. I think that's important. Be genuine, be authentic. The other thing is that you need to explain why. I always hated when I had a boss or a coach in sports that didn't explain why. They just told me what to do. I think you have to be able to explain why, right? It should be possible to be a leader and to try to achieve success without sacrificing your integrity or the dignity of others. To me, if you get success without doing that, it's not sustainable. It must be possible to do that. I have friends of mine that work at the Faculty of Islamic Studies, and they talk about that in the golden age, when there was a great deal of innovation in the Arab world, improvement was seen as kind of an ethical duty. Innovation was an ethical duty. It was your duty as part of society to make things better. I think that that's important. I think it's important to instill this type of ethical feeling in people, to inspire them, right? Inspire them to see this as something that you have to do. And of course, the last concept that's been around for a long time is this idea of the servant leader. I really think that to be a leader, a good leader, you have to care about other people more than yourself. It's completely essential. Because you don't need to get people to do what it is that you want them to do. You need to get them to understand what they want to do and get them to shine. Only does the leader shine when the people underneath them are able to shine. So for me, this is a few of my ideas about creating change and doing leadership, and I look forward to hear your opinions as well. Thank you.
I want to make a distinction in my own view between change and transformation. People say they're creating change, but what they do usually is doing, sorry? What they're doing is usually structural change. For instance, they say, oh, we are building hospitals and we are offering great service to patients. But I don't think this is leadership, this is just structural change. Are you helping people not to get sick in the first place? So you have to change their values. So you have to transform them. I think it's very important. And the other important concept is authority and leadership. And people think that if someone is in the authority position, they automatically exercise leadership. But you may be in the authority positions like a CEO or principal or prime minister, but not exercise leadership. Or you may have no authority like Gandhi, but exercise leadership. I think this is important too. I want to ask one question, and then we will start Q&A session. So you said, you used the word capacity building. I think it's very important. And also, Mr. Romit said collective responsibility, like engaging people in the process of change. So can you talk about like how did you enable people, like how did you work on capacity building at your university?
Yeah, actually, I was referring to helping other institutions to develop the capacity. In this case, institutions abroad.
But how?
Yeah, well, so my own institution is involved in this region and in Asia, much less so in Europe, in helping to start up research universities, which we are, MIT, and so we have a model for doing it. And so we do several things. We help to identify talent in the country, the target country, and in the region around it, though we try to look globally for that talent. And then we work with the nascent administration in recruiting that talent to the university, much as we do in our own institution. And if you believe you have an eye for talent, and maybe that's a bit egomaniacal of my part to say so, but we're pretty good at identifying talent, at least up until yesterday. So we need to figure out, can we bring the same kind of measures, standards, and so on. And also developing curriculum. Basically, what we want to do is develop the curricula that these countries need. And what we often find is, as we develop curricula for these countries, we find the curricula very attractive to ourselves, I mean, to our own institution. Now, you have to localize curricula wherever you go. So what we try to do is take back some of that. So there's a net win-win situation. The institution is getting something, but we actually strengthen our own curriculum. And I know this is happening on a number of fronts. And we're not the only institution doing this, but we do it mainly around the worlds of engineering and science, which is what we're probably best known for. And whether we succeed or not, that's to be, those measures are not, they're out there, but we haven't seen these institutions really blossom yet. They're just beginning to get off the ground.
Yeah. As we can see, I think learning is a very important aspect of leadership. And also, when you work on capacity building, it is not always, the results will come when people build their capacity. All right, maybe now we can start Q&A session. Yeah?
My name's Kevin Lamb, and I've been in higher ed planning and administration, so I kind of resemble the remarks you were making there earlier about the administration. And I guess my question is for Dr. Khoury. What would you tell the professoriate to do, and what would you tell the administrations to do with regard to creating change cultures in those two spheres of activity?
Well, you know, in our American institutions, particularly the research universities, but also the elite liberal arts colleges as well, we have a system called tenure. So once you're tenured, it's awfully hard to tell faculty what to do. As an administrator, I happen to be on the faculty as well, but once you cross over to the dark side, it's sometimes hard to come back. But so I think it is a two-way street. There is no way. The best ideas, whether we're working internationally or domestically in the United States, still come principally from our faculty with their students. The most creativity, the most innovative activity we do, whether it's in research or in education. In my institution, we try to link the two very tightly. They're coupled, and we're proud of that. It doesn't always work, but the correlation is quite strong. So there's no way an administration succeeds without bringing the faculty along with it. In days gone by, and I can remember those days, the faculty generated most of the ideas and created the, the institutions and projects that I'm trying to describe. Today, it is more and more top-down, which means that we have to create incentive structures that work for the faculty, and that the faculty feel, in the end, that they are able still to pursue the great curiosity problems. That, they're curious. We're curiosity-driven. And if they feel for a moment that it's all about the money and not about curiosity, they will shy away. They will turn away. And it is the art form to persuade them, to get them to persuade themselves, really, that these are, at the end, curiosity-driven projects that, yes, may bring resources into the institution that we would not otherwise be able to give to the faculty or that the faculty would be able to generate on its own.
Yes, please. Yes, here. No.
I'm Franny Leotier, a graduate from MIT, and I just wanted to ask first all the panelists. There is this idea that the knowledge economy is transforming the world of production. How would you cut it between the capacity to do and the knowledge to do versus the knowledge to think and analyze? And where does it go in terms of those two extremes in the way you're seeing changes in the workplace and the role of universities in that regard?
I try to comment. I try to understand a bit what you mean by of do and versus think. On one hand, knowledge is everywhere. So the term knowledge economy is a bad term in some way. So you really have to deconstruct it a bit for it to make any sense, because knowledge has been around. There's knowledge in cutting hair. There's knowledge in cutting down trees. There's knowledge in everything. So the knowledge economy, to a certain extent, means more about how knowledge now can be packaged as something that's valuable in itself. And so, for the first time, instead of taking knowledge and putting it into physical things and selling the physical things, now knowledge itself can become a property that can be bought and sold. And that allows for completely new industries to be created. It allows for universities to become places that can make billions of dollars, because they're generating knowledge which they package oftentimes through intellectual property, and then they're able to license it out. So part of the knowledge economy is that the control of knowledge is now the key, as opposed to the control of the factors of production. And that can be good and bad for society. And control can be good and bad in different ways, because it's the control of copyright that allows for open source. So control of intellectual property creates openness. So without intellectual property, you can't have openness either. So it's very much, again, how you ethically handle the situation and what creates the most welfare. You're always going to have physical things. It's just that the people who make the money in the chain will be different. So the people who make the Nike shoes in Indonesia don't make nearly as much money as the people managing the brand of Nike in Oregon. So you have these capabilities, and when something is intellectual, the brand, the technology, the ability to manage it, the value that the intellectual asset has is completely dependent on the capability of the person managing it. it doesn't have a value per se, if you follow me. So of course, all these different complementary assets will be important with production and whatnot. But of course, in the knowledge economy, you both have the knowledge and the capabilities to manage intellectual assets, but knowledge per se as itself becomes an object that has value, if that helps. So,
yeah. This is a time for competition, and so every universities are competing each other. In other words, from our viewpoint, the level of the university are decided based on the ability of the student, graduate student of the universities. If the university can produce, can send the able people, then this university will be valued, esteemed highly. Otherwise, the competition among universities will come to the result of the, what shall I say, minus effect on the future activities of the university. Of course, each person, each company or the business circle are expected to have the best people. That means the flexible people to solve the problem. Problem solution is necessary capacity for the people who are sent from the university. And this will decide the level of the university.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're an alumna of MIT, you will know our motto is the Latin mens et manus, mind and hand, learning by doing. So whatever you studied there, you probably had a bit of both, I hope. And that model, incidentally, is hardly MIT's invention. It exists more and more in institutions around the world where students are and faculty are not simply doing theory or theorizing, though we don't want to lose our sense of that, but they're applying what they're learning in the workplace, abroad, internships, people bringing back knowledge by doing with their knowledge.
I think also we need to focus on, rather than problem solving, maybe we need to focus on problem finding, because our students keep solving problems, but they can't find problems. They solve. But universities are a very good position at finding problems. A gentleman, yes? Here? Yeah.
Hi, my name is David Matthews from Times Higher Education. It's a question directed at Professor Cowrie. I was quite interested in your argument that universities have been, if I follow it correctly, that universities have been quite conservative. They've been very resilient over the past couple of 100 years. They've survived very well, but now they need to change more rapidly than ever before. What is it about this period of history that means they need to adapt quicker than they have done and can no longer rest on those whatever previous laurels they had? Is it economic? Is it social? Is it technological? Could you explain a bit more about that? It was very interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure there's several ways of cutting into that excellent question. One, universities are not, maybe they never were, but they're no longer an exclusive domain for knowledge creation, okay? In the United States alone, and it's just, you can see this in Europe, increasingly in Asia, even in the Middle East I'm seeing it. More and more institutions that are outside the university are doing the kind of research that allows knowledge to be generated. And they're applying it, sometimes much more effectively than we universities are able to do. They have a better sense of how policy works and how to get at it. So that's just one example. But I think the internet alone, I had just begun to touch on what online education and online research, because the two really will come together at one point, what that is doing to make it very important for universities to act a little more swiftly, take more risks perhaps than we're used to taking, and with all the downside of risk that we have to be very careful about in order to figure out how to preserve ourselves. And we're going to morph into something else, but many of us at the high end of higher education, that is doctoral education and so on, still believe the residential campus is for the future, that it isn't going to disappear, but we've got to figure out how to make sure it doesn't. Otherwise, we're going to go out of business in the way we know universities.
All right. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Halima Al-Qadi. I'm an educator here in Qatar. And I just, perhaps one of the biggest obstacles to creating a culture of change is people. And but people are also the key to creating change culture. So I was just wondering if each of the panelists might be able to give just from their own personal experience with change and creating change culture, how, just how they were able to deal with preparing people for innovation or for change.
So how do you increase readiness for change?
That's a difficult question, of course, and it's different in different places and in different contexts. Sometimes it's good. I know when I was teaching master's level, if you can get a bunch of people together, we ran a program that had between 4 faculties. So we had business students, engineering students, law students, and medical students together. And at any one moment in time, one of those groups was traumatized by what they were being taught. So the lawyers were like, why do we have to do this? And you're giving us too little time, and people are crying because their grades are on the line. But once they get through this kind of trauma, they start to wear this type of interdisciplinariness as a kind of badge of honor. And I think that that's what has to happen in order to get change. You have to kind of inspire people to take on something. Maybe you don't completely tell them what they're in for. Maybe that's kind of the role. But to get people to kind of push through this early stage where change is difficult and start to see that this is actually producing. It's similar this summer when I was trying to lose weight. I had to keep with it long enough to get past the stage where it actually started to become noticeable and useful, right? So I think that to me, it's all about inspiration. And I think ever since I've been teaching, the content is important, but you have to constantly try to inspire people to do something more than they might necessarily think to do on their own. So it's all about inspiration, in my mind.
Are you gonna?
Just to feed on what Bo has said, feed may not be the right term. If he's dieting, I should do the same. But it's not simply preparedness. That's the hard part, I agree. It's sustainability once you have prepared a cohort of people. How do you not just wait for one opportunity or one crisis to come along and then have to go through that entire process of getting people all marching, hopefully to the same drummer in the right direction, marching together. How can you create a kind of culture that is always prepared, always ready? Not easy at all. I mean, it's hard enough to just get it done once.
Sports that's very interesting is when you often see coaches. As a coach, I get very happy when all of a sudden my teammates explain something as if they were a coach about they get interviewed at the game. And you can see that this has been, that they've internalized it and it's going to be sustainable, as you say, Philip.
Yeah, I want to add a comment. I think it's very important to help people face the reality. And most of the change initiatives, they assume that people don't have knowledge. For instance, they smoke and you say smoking is bad. Of course, they know smoking is bad. For instance, in my project, in order to help the teachers connect better with students, I make them visit their home, like disadvantaged home. They see the reality where students come from. I think knowledge, just giving information or creating fear, doesn't work in any other change initiative. Helping them face the reality, I think, is very important. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Abdul Rahim Al-Amin, Al-Ghurairi University, Dubai. Before I get to my question, I would like to make a small distinction between change and improvement and development. So the way that I see it, change is to do different things, and improvement and development is to do things differently. My question is, do you think in educational institutions, what is needed is a culture of change or a culture of continuous improvement and development? As change might necessitate abandoning what we are doing, but improvement and development is to do what we are doing, but we do it differently. Thank you.
Is the question? Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes by Peter Drucker is, there's nothing worse than doing with great efficiency what should never have been done in the first place. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. You have to understand, in the literature on innovation, the scholars talk about riding two horses. How can you do incremental change and capitalize on your strengths and what you've done, but at the same time think about doing things completely differently. And this is just always a challenge. And it's very difficult. People have been talking about this forever, and it's not that easy. And leadership is important, but even sometimes leaders that do it in one organization aren't able to do it in another. But to keep an eye on both, like you said, to be able to do both and to understand the difference, that is the trick. I wish I could give you the secret sauce for that.
Yeah, there are also questions from tweeters. For instance, what does the developing world have to teach the developed world about a culture of change? Like, I think it's all about, maybe it's assumed that the developed world is teaching the developing world, but what they can learn from the developing world.
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have a very good answer for it. But what I've learned over time in my institution is that the most important challenges, problems, where real curiosity lies these days is found not exclusively, but largely in the developing world or in the emerging economies. And so by the very fact that these issues have risen and are rising faster and faster, makes us all, the so-called developed and the so-called developing worlds, need to find some mechanisms for partnerships and collaboration where everyone wins. I mean, where it is not just the big behemoth, the West or the United States coming in and saying, this is the way we're going to learn. It has to be mutual, it has to be interactive, and that in itself will teach us in the West, in the so-called developed world, a lot about how maybe to be better partners than we have proved to be. That's an editorial. In recent times, in recent history.
Mr. Ahmed, did you want to say something?
I have been a long time the member of the Congress, and we think sometimes necessary to have a kind of change of the society system or the taxation system. So this kind of change or the new taxation is necessary from the viewpoint of the benefit of this country. However, in the field of the policy maker, necessary to persuade the people to accept this, to drink the bitter medicine, which is very beneficial to the health, actually. Almost everybody know about it. But almost many people are very reluctant to take this kind of bitter medicine, which is beneficial for health in the long run. However, taste is bitter. And so in that case, leadership is also, of course, necessary, but the persuasion of the people is also necessary. This is one of the major subjects for the policymaker or the leaders of the society should solve to make this society, even in the case of the academic circle, make a progress to the right direction. So it's a kind of leadership and decisive action, not a kind of the intelligence, but a decisive belief is necessary to change the world. In other words, after persuading the people. And to persuade the people, it's necessary to have the belief rather than the knowledge. That's my opinion. When we think of improving the society by taking the decisive and effective, better way to change the society, or even maybe this can be applied to the, even in the academic circle activities.
Oh, yes, please.
Hi.
You are dying to ask? All right, after, okay.
My name is Michael Andrews. I'm part of the, sorry, I have a bit of a cold. I'm part of the Learner's Voice this year. I'm from the University of the West Indies, and I study medicine. There was a lot of talk about tertiary level education and change, and how you can prepare them for change. But I think that early childhood education plays a really critical role in facilitating change in the future, because if you place emphasis on early childhood education, then students are better able to adapt to change because their minds are more open. They have an imagination and they're more creative. And yeah.
Question is? A comment. You want one? Okay, thank
comment,
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please. No, after. Yeah.
My name is Fuad Amrad, and I'm with the United Nations ASQA. And my question is for Dr. Khoury, who is my friend, and I was a professor at the American University of Beirut for 17 years. He's the chairman of the board. And I want to bring the discussion or the topics home a little bit to the region. What we heard sounds excellent, and I count on the leadership of Dr. Khoury and the leadership of AUB in the region to make a change in the problems we are facing. I mean, in the Arab region, we have over 500 universities. We have researchers and scientists who are publishing over 17,000 publications, Scopus, publications per year, 17,000 per year. And yet, our innovation indicators, patents, and what have you, IP, it's all almost zero, almost zero. Yet, we don't know how to desalinate our water, even though 70% of the desalination industry is in this region. We don't know how, we have many, many problems. So, this opportunity, this capacity, the professors, the universities, huge numbers, but frozen or doing nothing but publications, because that's how we are measuring our faculty. More publications that are disconnected from this region and not related to our problems. Can you take a leadership position and, and ask the professors in your university to do more problem solving, innovate, relate, and connect to our regional problems, rather than only publish or perish? Thank you very much.
I learned long ago that trustees should at some time stay out of the business of the academy. But when you're an academic and a trustee, you get a little more involved, maybe more than I should be. This is an enormous question Fuad has asked, frankly. And it is the issue, it is not just limited to the Arab world or the Middle East more widely, it's all over. I'm noticing this in Singapore. The same kind of questions are being raised by stellar academics like yourself. Are we really doing what these societies need as knowledge generators? Are we really making the applications that are necessary, the problem solving that you talk about? I think we need a mix. We need, and the balance needs to shift more in the direction you're pointing to. I agree with you, really. I also know that in this region, which you and I both know quite well, we have yet to produce truly stellar research universities. I know that's very hard to say that, but I mean it. The AUB, of course, may be the greatest of them all, and it's been around longer than the others for the most part, from the 1860s. But we still have a long ways to go. What's happened, alas, is many of the public institutions that were once very strong in this region, in Egypt, in Cairo, in Damascus, in Baghdad, elsewhere, have become factories for mass production of education with very little serious research. And the private institutions that have grown up to try to fill some of the void that we see created by the mass market of the publics are really not very much better, not yet. They could become, but they're much smaller, and they still haven't developed the research bases this region so desperately needs. And we heard a little about it in our first panel this morning. So yes, the shift should be in that direction, but please don't give up the notion of basic research, generalizing principles that will be useful not just for the region, but for the world.
And it raises the question of knowledge for what, I think. Also, Harvard, which has the best economists, lost $10 billion. So you think, how can the best economists lose money like this? And can we, just one last question, or, okay, one last question. Okay. Comment? I mean, you said one last question. Is there time for... All right, if you can be quick, then yes.
Okay, my name is Dr. Mishal Shambri. I'm from King Saud University in Saudi Arabia. Change, when we talk about the change, and we just focus on the region here, let's say in the Arab world, don't you think the change itself, it's not a goal, it's not an end itself? That is, maybe we change for worse, you know, but don't you think what we need is change management or change leadership? That is, it's to be institutional, not led by or run by just individuals. I mean, what we miss here, we just, as we see the Arab Spring, it was a crisis of management. Management the country, and it's a crisis mainly of management. I believe myself, and it's also a question, is it a question of, you know, management, of change or change management? Thank you.
Yeah, it's. I think that you're right. Of course, change is a means, right? And I think this is one of the things that we always have to consider. This is one of the things I talk with my group all the time, is that you have to keep the ends in sight, because sometimes you'll start to see the means as ends, because you'll start to see that we're building roads and we're doing things and we're accomplishing a lot of stuff, but these are means for something else, right? And that's why in the mission of our new institution, we state that we're looking to create quality of life. So you always have to keep that in mind. How is it that you're doing is creating a better life for people? How is this impacting? So again, if you get researchers to produce patents, 99% of patents are worthless. So it's not enough just to produce the patents. You have to have the people that can take the ideas and turn them into something. You need the entrepreneurs. But again, like you said, you have to keep what it is you want to have in focus, and then the means on which that you get to that becomes much more clear. Otherwise, change can just send you in any direction. I think it's Alice in Wonderland has a quote that says,
sorry,
if you don't know where you're going, in any direction is good. Right?
There's a question that keeps coming. It seems like universities' innovation is limited to increasing tuition. Do you think, is there another alternative? Very briefly.
This is the only...
This is, yeah. Universities' innovations in education seem to have been limited to increased tuition. Do you see any other alternative to increasing their resources to change?
I'm sure many parents feel that's true, certainly in private institutions and increasingly in public institutions in the United States. So it's hard to argue against it. And we need to make universities more affordable, more accessible. And the two are not actually the same, because accessible means making sure that we're bringing all kinds of diversity into the institution. And of course, financially, it would be nice to make sure that we can support as many of the needy students who are super that we want. But no, I think there are other ways to avoid having to lift tuition. One, I think we could become a lot more efficient in how we administer our universities. That is, the very institutions that we so much love. We don't like to think about reorganizing. Someone mentioned change earlier. I mean, we need to figure out how to make ourselves a lot more efficient in order to save the sorts of monies and not be forced to raise. So that kind, and then we need to learn how to generate resources better than we do. There are two sides of the equation here.
Thank you. Let's hear your comment.
My comment concerns...
microphone, if you can have the mic.
Thank you. Sorry, my name is Altom from Sudan. My comment concerns change in the rather distant future. I'm talking about 2050. By then, it is estimated, as I'm sure most of you know, that the world population will be around 9 billion. And most of these the big population will be in Asia, 2 billion in Africa, and the present West, about 1 billion. So it's not just numbers, but if you look at other important indicators, that standard indicators, GDP, economic growth, expenditure on research and development, etc., there are present trends that show that by 2050, these 7 billions in the present so-called developing countries, it's an expression that I really don't know of any acceptable definition to it. But anyway, they would have overtaken, in terms of these indicators, the present West. So this requires, to me, a significant cultural change in the mindsets of both present so-called developing countries and present developed countries. And just to give one very simple example, and important, I think.
Simple and short example.
Okay, the Western civilization has been dominant for the past, few hundred years. But by then, there must be a new attitude. You know, we'll have a completely new world. How would they, in both parts of the world, you know, how would they cope with this significant change? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Shall we finish, or did you want to say something? All right. Okay. Thank you so much for coming and listening. And I am just going to make a housekeeping announcement. Okay. There is a thematic plenary session at 5. And also, please, your translation headsets, please do not forget to return them. Thank you so much. We will see you around here. Okay, thank you. Bye. And thank you.